Back in the Wild West, people dealt with hygiene challenges without modern comforts. Today, let's dive into their fascinating yet somewhat unsettling practices in a world far from today's conveniences. Women would clean their faces with river water. Imagine being in the Wild West, where dirt was everywhere, and it was tough to stay clean. But how did people deal with this constant dirt? Well, the clever women of that time had their own ways. Every morning, they went to springs or streams to wash their faces and drink water, but there was a problem. There was little privacy at these water spots, and they couldn't take full baths often. So, splashing water on their faces was the best they could do to stay clean. People went to the bathroom in outhouses that smelled horrible. When people think of the Wild West, they usually picture cowboys and Western movies. However, it was a time without modern toilets. Instead, they had outhouses, outdoor sheds with holes in the ground. These outhouses were pretty unpleasant, with bad smells, lots of bugs, and no toilet paper. In fact, toilet paper didn't become common in the West until the mid-1800s. People had to use leaves, corn cobs, or grass as not-so-great alternatives, and the smell was so bad that being near one would make you feel sick. Lysol was used as a cure for many infections. Back in the day when people didn't talk openly about personal problems, there was an unusual solution: Lysol. Yes, you heard it right. Lysol, originally meant for cleaning, ended up being used for personal hygiene. Women dealing with discomfort used it for various issues, including yeast infections and even birth control. Surprisingly, they didn't know that Lysol had harmful chemicals that could be more of a problem than a solution. It took a while for society to realize how risky this was. So the Wild West wasn't just adventurous. It was also a tough time for people dealing with health problems. Bars were filled with bad quality liquor and towels full of bacteria. In the wild days of old Western saloons, where liquor flowed freely and adventures abounded, a hidden and unsettling truth lurked beneath the surface. Folks would venture into unknown territories, stumbling upon ramshackle saloons, notorious for serving a notorious concoction called rotgut liquor. This brew was often a mishmash of poor quality spirits, capable of leaving drinkers feeling queasy. And if that wasn't eyebrow-raising enough, the bar rails sported towels, ostensibly for mopping up beer-soaked beards. Unbeknownst to patrons, these seemingly innocent towels were actually teeming with germs and filth. Families bathed in the same bathwater. Back in the early Wild West days, having a bathtub at home was a real luxury, something not everyone could swing. The hassle of hauling water, heating it, and filling a tub kept most folks tubless. It wasn't until Sears, Roebuck and Company dropped their mail-order catalogs in 1894 that affordable tubs became an option. Still, even then, a Sears catalog tub would set you back nearly $800 in today's cash. As more homes got their hands on tubs, the family would take turns using the same bathwater to save on the legwork. That's how the Saturday night bath tradition came about. Everybody wanted to look sharp for Sunday service. It was common to sleep in bug-infested beds made of straw. Picture a time when beds were nothing more than straw and hay piles with no fancy bed frames to lift them off the ground. It might sound wild now, but that's how things rolled in the past. Comfort was kind of an afterthought because, even though straw wasn't the coziest, it sure beat sleeping directly on the hard floor. But here's the catch: keeping these straw beds clean and bug-free? Not easy at all. They were basically bug motels, with critters of all kinds finding their way into those haystacks. The surprising truth behind infrequent showers in the Wild West. Out in the wild American West, staying clean was a whole different ballgame. Pioneers and cowboys had this weird idea that too many showers could actually mess up their health. They thought it'd make their pores a playground for germs and sickness. But let's get real. It wasn't easy. Clean water was a rare find, so many folks just gave up on regular bathing. Turns out that reluctance came with some pretty gross side effects. Cowboys, rocking the same outfits every day, ended up battling stubborn fungal infections that thrived in all that dirt. Most people didn't have toilet paper. In the Wild West, folks had to get creative with bathroom stuff. No toilet paper for a long time, so they used corn cobs, ripped up magazines, and catalogs. Medicated paper by Joseph Gaetti showed up in 1857, but it was single sheets, no rolls. Roll-style TP came in 1890 with the toilet paper holder. Real toilet paper didn't hit its stride until the 1920s. Wild West bathrooms? Yeah, they were pretty unconventional. Unbelievable medicines of the Wild West, from cocaine to aspirin. In those grimy times, hygiene was a luxury, and sickness was everywhere. But pioneers had some unexpected fixes. Imagine a cowboy with a toothache. Their go-to? Cocaine, you heard it. In the 1880s, toothache drops with cocaine were all the rage. It worked like a charm, numbing the pain and giving folks a break from dental agony. With no clean water and lousy waste disposal, diseases ran wild. These medicines were a lifeline in a messy world. Whiskey was often drunk in place of a meal. When we think about the Wild West, we picture cowboys chowing down on hearty grub by the campfire. But in reality, the pioneers' diets were pretty basic. They'd chow down on beans for a whole meal, and would even make a meal out of whiskey at times. It's safe to say that looking after their health wasn't their top priority. And even when they had decent food, the shortage of clean water and less than sanitary conditions in the kitchen made their meals a breeding ground. Clean water for drinking and showering was hard to come by. Back in the Wild West, having the luxury of running water was like chasing a mirage. As the United States pushed westward in the 1800s, most places didn't have fancy water setups, while the folks in settled areas had their irrigation and filtering systems. Those who ventured into the wild had to say goodbye to these modern comforts. So, taking showers, brushing your teeth, and getting a sip of fresh water were all uphill battles. Their best shot was catching rainwater, because otherwise, staying hydrated and staying clean were tricky tasks that didn't happen daily. The struggle for sanitation and proper bathrooms. Indoor plumbing hit the big cities like New York as far back as 1842, but the Wild West took its sweet time to catch up. It wasn't until 1920 that just 1% of homes across the whole U.S. could boast any kind of indoor plumbing. For most country homes out west, the best they could manage was hand-pumped water. Imagine bathrooms that looked more like porta-potties we see today. With so many homes lacking proper sanitation, basic hygiene was a bit of a struggle, leading to some pretty unsanitary living conditions and potential health issues for the folks out there. Cowboy bandanas could protect against overwhelming smells. Wild West cowboys and cowgirls were more than just style icons. Their accessories did double duty, blending practicality and hygiene. Bandanas weren't just for looks. They shielded against harsh winds and blazing sun. Plus, in an era with limited clean water and infrequent baths, personal hygiene wasn't always top-notch. Wearing bandanas around their neck or face helped keep the dirt at bay and cut down on the spread of germs and unpleasant smells that were all too common in those rugged Wild West days. Most men in the Wild West had long and dirty hair. Out in the Wild West, guys' hair wasn't just about style, it told a story of their travels. Most dudes skipped haircuts because they were always on the move, and that meant less time for cleaning up. So their long locks were like a roadmap of how far they'd roamed, and let's be real, how long it had been since they had a decent shower. You can bet their hair got pretty ripe. But hold on tight, because we're about to spill all the dirty deets on the Wild West's not-so-clean secrets. The deadly toll of disease in the Wild West. Out in the Wild West, diseases were the biggest threat to pioneers' lives. About 9 out of 10 folks fell victim to illnesses like dysentery, smallpox, measles, mumps, flu, cholera, mountain fever, and scurvy. Cholera was especially nasty and widespread, often spreading through contaminated water, which was pretty common in those not-so-clean conditions. Pioneers were always on edge about getting sick or worse due to iffy hygiene and the scarcity of clean water. Staying healthy was a real struggle in the rugged wilderness of the Wild West. Live shows were breeding grounds for germs. Back in the 1800s, when Buffalo Bill's Wild West show was all the rage, there was some not-so-glamorous stuff going on behind the scenes. Behind all the flashy acts and thrilling reenactments, keeping things clean was a bit of a challenge. They didn't have fancy bathrooms, so performers and staff had a tough time staying fresh with their jam-packed schedules. The dusty arenas and crowded campsites were like germ playgrounds, putting everyone at risk of catching something nasty, whether you were in the show or just watching. Even churches of this time were crawling with germs. The old mission church in New Mexico is like a time capsule of history and culture, but it's got some not-so-clean secrets back in the Wild West days. Hygiene wasn't a top priority, even in this historic spot. With different folks coming and going, the church didn't get the TLC it needed. Dust and grime settled on those ancient walls, basically throwing a germ party. In those times, low hygiene standards meant more diseases and discomfort for the folks who came to worship. Today, we admire the old mission church for its history, but let's not forget the less than sparkling past it had in terms of cleanliness. Mercury was used to combat syphilis. Back in the day, there was a scary epidemic called syphilis that spread like wildfire. Doctors thought mercury could cure it, so patients endured applying mercury ointment daily for years, even though it caused awful side effects like ulcers, teeth loss, and kidney failure. People believed it was worth it, but dealing with health issues back then was truly terrifying.